you been annoyed by the way Games Workshop keeps pushing out new kits for those hoity-toity Cadians and fancy deathcore posers in their long skirts? Do you long for the days when the Guard was made of roided up monsters from planets where the very air wants to kill you? Well, the good news is that Codex Astra Militarum comes packed with a Catachan flavored detachment just for you, the Recon Element. We'd like to thank Games Workshop for providing us with a preview copy of these rules for review purposes. If you'd like to read something other than muscle and fitness, head on over to goonhammer.com for written companion to this video. Link in the description. Detachment Rule: Masters of Camouflage. All regiment and walker units have the benefit of cover all the time. If a model would also receive the benefit of cover thanks to terrain or other effects, add +1 to the model's save characteristic, to a maximum of 3 up. This is great for upping the durability of all the units you want in this detachment. Cover all the time is just good if you're throwing down hordes of 5-up save infantry, and getting an extra bonus on top of that, which you can stack with the take cover order, can push your units to saving like Space Marines. Chewing through the sheer numbers of dudes available to you becomes very tough at range. Don't forget that the core go-to-ground stratagem exists, which provides an on-demand way to switch on the extra bonus here. You can reliably plan around moving out a full infantry stack and pushing them to a 3-up save with cover. Obviously melee can still scythe through your dudes like so much roided up grass, but the detachment has some stratagems that can reduce the risk of that as well. It isn't just horde infantry who benefit here. Always being in cover is fantastic for armored sentinels with their base 2-up save, making these a great addition to the detachment. Heavy weapon squads, field ordnance batteries, and artillery teams all have regiment as well, increasing the value of those in this detachment, particularly Catachan 1s and the new Krieg heavy weapon squads, which start strong with a 4-up save. Finally, Death Riders and Rough Riders both benefit and enjoy upping their defenses. These cavalry units also give you something that can get stuck into combat if the opponent tries to bully you in melee, mitigating one of the biggest weaknesses of this detachment. We'll say it now, Masters of Camouflage is one of the strongest detachment rules offered by this entire book. The enhancements are an interesting mix of utility options, with some being very cheap though fairly niche. Guerrilla Honors is the most expensive one printed, and it lets you redeploy up to 3 infantry units or put them into strategic reserves. You're probably still taking Lord Solar if you really want a redeploy effect, but if you really wanted to, you could redeploy half a dozen squads for maximum bamboozlement. Scare Gas Grenades forces a battle shock test on an enemy unit once per game. It's ultra cheap and doesn't require line of sight, so huck it over a wall if you've got a couple points left over at the end of list construction. Survival Gear is another cheap enhancement, and it gives the bearer scouts 6 inches, but notably does not extend it to a unit they lead. This was a bit of a head scratcher at first, but there are a couple of uses. Its best use is probably on Acadian Castellan joining Castrican without removing their ability to scout, or sticking a Primera Psyker with a big brick of Catachans. The former feels somewhat plausible given that the Castellan also gets an extra order in this book. Tripwires is a fantastically annoying upgrade, giving you the chance to stun any infantry or mounted unit that ends a normal move, advance, fallback, or charge within 9 inches of the bearer's unit. This stun inflicts -1 to hit until your next turn on a 4-up. This is surprisingly viable, as it helps deal with one of the army's weaknesses, which is getting rolled over by melee units. Because this triggers from the bearer's whole unit rather than just the bearer, and triggers on charges as well as movement phase stuff, you're very likely to get 2 rolls against melee threats, meaning that this combines really well with the plan of pushing one big squad up and using stratagems to limit the opponent's ability to react to them. This detachment's stratagems provide a strong, cohesive suite of tools to execute the board control plan and are a big part of why it should have legs. Crack Shots gives a platoon unit precision when they shoot. It's probably the weakest one here, but still okay on occasion on Krieg units, as it can let them spike out a character. Draw Them Out allows a platoon unit to make a 6-inch reactive move after your opponent ends a move within 9 inches. This is more like it. The ground coverage on platoon units can be huge, so this gives you lots of agency to respond to the opponent or control space. Scramble Field lets one of your infantry units cosplay as Space Marine infiltrators, projecting a 12-inch reinforcement denial bubble around them. This is very strong, especially for a list that can have 25 model units in it and an outright spoiler for some matchups. Courageous Diversion gives one of your infantry or mounted units a 6-up Feel No Pain and a -1 to be hit when they're the closest eligible target for your opponent's shooting. This can help protect a giant infantry stack that's controlling space, or significantly boost the survivability of Death Riders or Rough Riders, as a 6-up Feel No Pain always works best on multi-wound models. Just remember that you need to use this at the start of the phase. Tanglefoot Grenades hands out a -2 to charge rolls against one of your units with the Grenades keyword. This is handy, and it works especially well with Death Riders or a unit that reactive moved would draw them out to make it hard to nail a charge. Units with grenades are extremely common in this codex, and even heavy weapon teams, field ordnance, and artillery batteries have it, so if you're using those as backfield objective holders, this can disrupt a deep strike charge. Scouting Outriders lets one of your mounted or walker units return to strategic reserves at the end of your opponent's turn, provided they're near a board edge. It's great for bouncing a squad of armored sentinels around to shoot at stuff, or repositioning rough riders or scout sentinels for scoring. Take tons of scouting infantry, add a splash of cavalry and sentinels, and be an absolute menace to your opponent's game plan. This detachment is focused on ruining your opponent's ability to execute their plan through movement reaction with a flood of cheap and durable units while denying charges and deep strikes. You're forcing your opponent into a plan of outright aggression. If they haven't brought the smoke, they're gonna be out of luck. This style of army has a long history of putting up impressive performances in the hands of players whose backs can take the strain of moving 150 models around the table, and this looks like it might be good enough to be a problem. Supporting cavalry and sentinels in addition to infantry also increases flexibility in how you build this. Armored sentinels feel like they're legitimately great here. This detachment has real promise in singles events and should absolutely go in the toolbox for team builds thanks to how effectively it plays its intended skew game. Now let's see what the gains and pains are here. Its first strength is infantry and cavalry. Honestly, the detachment rule here is crazy. If you've done the math, this detachment gives you the ability to build in a 3-up save, effectively a 2-up save with cover versus attacks with AP. This is absolutely bonkers for data sheets that start on a 5-up save. It's also great at board control. There are no surprises allowed against you when you're playing this detachment. No deep strikers, no lucky long bomb charges, and no attacking your fighting units without an easy to achieve debuff. It's also great at scoring. You're going to have a lot of OC in this detachment because you're going to be taking a lot more guardsmen and other small units. This plays great in controlling mid-board objectives early via the scout rule, and it allows you to easily achieve action-based secondary objectives as those come up. Now let's see where this detachment skipped leg day. There's nothing here for your tanks. You're going to have to find other ways to bring killing power or accept the fact that your tanks aren't always going to be operating at peak efficiency. Pressure. This detachment will probably struggle against armies that present multiple melee threats up the board fast. These days, World Eaters are able to bring an impressive amount of MSU melee threats to bear with eye-watering movement on the first turn. When engaged with that many melee threats, a high ratio of horses and guardsmen may not do much for you. And frankly, the enhancements are pretty expensive and somewhat middling in this detachment. The nice thing is that there are 2 cheap ones to help you pad out points. The issue is that most of those are typically going to be relevant once or twice a game at most. Recon Element may be the strongest detachment in the book. We've got no doubts that there's going to be some skewed lists that put up good results with these rules. Hopefully, this detachment doesn't become so dominant in the competitive scene that it drives up points for the rest of the book. If you're a fan of infantry hordes and MSU, enjoy it while it lasts. If you'd like to find out more about this detachment and how we'd build a list with it, head on over to goonhammer.com for more coverage. While you're at it, consider supporting us on Patreon to keep this content coming. I've been Corbeck McFirst and Only, slipping back into strategic reserves until the next video. Thanks for watching.